generation farmer from Newport, and we made the decision to go out this year in the spring. So my son will not be the seventh generation on our farm.
5 of my customers have committed suicide.
And I love them, and I'm never going to do anything to hurt our farmers.
I voted for him because I'd like to see manufacturing come back to this country. I'd like to see good paying jobs. I want to see everybody do better. And I think this is some short-term pain for a long-term gain.
We don't do something. We're not going to have no family farm.
Question is, what do you have to say to U.S. farmers who feel that the deal is benefiting Argentina more than it is them, as they are?
Argentina's fighting for its life, young lady. You don't know anything about it.
U.S. farmers are growing increasingly frustrated with President Trump amid his ongoing trade war with numerous countries, specifically China, which typically buys more than half of America's soybeans. As of this year, they've bought none. In fact, China has bought its soybeans from Argentina, which just received a $20 billion bailout from the federal government, and Brazil. And while the Trump administration says it plans on releasing aid to these farmers who were hurt by Trump's trade war, these farmers say that's just a temporary solution. What they really need are these long-term relationships with countries like China, which at this point, many say they may never get back. But before we unpack all that, if you like this kind of content and want to support the channel, don't forget to hit subscribe. Joining me today to unpack all of that is Adam Chappell of Chappell Farms in Cotton Plant, Arkansas. Welcome.
Howdy, thanks for having me.
You know, I was reading you are a fourth generation farmer out of Arkansas, and I'm sure your family has weathered a lot of storms when it comes to farming. What is different about this particular time around when it comes to the impact that the Trump administration's tariffs and trade war has had on farming?
Well, you know, the tariffs are not good for sure. They're causing input prices to go up, and we're losing obviously a lot of market share on the export market with China for soybeans. So those are some major impacts we've had. You know, we've been through this once before, and I don't know that China's going to come back after this round. When Trump was in office the first time, they started investing heavily in South America. You know, and they've dumped a ton of money down there on logistical infrastructure, and they really don't have a lot of reason to come back to us. So I think what's different this time from the last time is all of that infrastructure they have in place and all the investment they've made. You know, that wasn't in place during the last trade war, so I doubt they're going to walk away from all that just out of the goodness of their heart. So that's kind of the part that scares me currently. As far as the overall farm crisis that we're in, you know, the tariffs are just the latest rock on the pile, I guess you'd say, because we've been battling, you know, consolidation by big corporations for decades now, and it's gotten to the point where they are so consolidated and monopolized that we can't escape them, and our input costs are out of control because there's no competition. There's no place for us to go other than the few companies that control all the fertilizer, the seed, et cetera, et cetera. And then when they get the smokescreen of tariffs, you know, I'm sure that some of their import costs do go up, but they always seem to pile on several more percent to pad their profit margin. So,
Right.
It's getting increasingly worse on a number of fronts out here.
You had mentioned the relationship with China, and then you know, after the first administration and that tariff war, they had been pumping money into infrastructure down in South America. So we've learned that China, which has typically been the largest purchaser of U.S. soybeans, that they've now purchased their soybeans from Argentina, which just received a $20 billion bailout from the federal government, and Brazil. So I wanted to get your reaction to when you found out that China has now, like, they're not even playing ball with the U.S. on that front. They have bought their soybeans from Argentina and Brazil. What is your reaction to that new relationship between those countries in terms of the soybean production and also the bailout from the federal government at this particular time?
Well, to address the China portion of that question first, I honestly can't blame them for making investments in other parts of the world, because you know this tariff nonsense, it lacks any strategy that I can tell. You know, I'm not drinking the Kool-Aid that this guy is some kind of master deal maker. It looks to me like he's real impulsive, real I don't know, childish. I mean, really. I mean, he says he's helping Argentina out because he likes the president down there. I don't, you know, and he just doesn't like China or something. I don't know. Anyway, back to my point. China, I can't blame them for investing in another part of the world, because when this guy is in office, there is absolutely no stability in the trade markets. I mean, he's the one that put together the North American trade deal and then blew it up as soon as he got into this term. So he doesn't even like his own trade deals that he made the last time he was in place. So so as far as them investing in another part of the world, I can't blame them. I mean, I would do the same thing if my number one supplier kept jacking around with prices and whatnot. And I understand that China is not always the best actor. You know, I'm sure that there's things that they do that are not to our benefit, and I get all that, and that's just part of the hardball of global trade. But this nonsensical on again, off again, 50%, 100%, 200% tariffs, depending on what day of the week it is and what side of the bed he woke up on, is just ridiculous. And so I can't blame them for investing somewhere else. As far as what's going on with Argentina, I have no idea what's going on down there with this guy. He's got investor buddies that are in a pickle down there, or it could be as simple as he just likes the president because he, you know, I don't know. That's the whole point. There's no logical, there's no plan, there's nothing you can look to and say, okay, well, he said, you know, this is what he was going to do, and this is how he was going to do it. There's none of that. It's just whatever's happening that day, and for him to dump that kind of money into Argentina when his constituents and voters want, which I am not one of his voters, but I am one of his constituents, are in a farm crisis that rivals 1980. You know, we are in desperate need of relief, and we've gone 20 billion, now talking about 40 billion to Argentina, who is a direct competitor of ours. So I don't understand any of what he's doing. And to me, it's a slap in the face. I just, you know, the people that put him in office, 60% of farmers voted for him. You know, he's not worried about them. He's worried about Argentina and whatever's going on down there. So I don't know.
And, you know, you had mentioned that because I did want to ask that, because you're correct. About 60% of farmers did vote for Trump again. And, you know, a lot of people are wondering what they heard the second time around, because we went through this during the first administration when he engaged in the trade war and had to do a bailout because of the farming community was hurt by his policies. And he did campaign on tariffs again. When you're talking amongst other farmers that may have voted for him and that were disappointed now, did they mention what were they hoping would happen this time around?
Yeah, I'm not going to pretend to be able to get in the mind of somebody that can do that, but I will say what they have relayed to me is that they actually believe in these tariffs. They think that it's going to bring manufacturing and stuff back to the United States. I mean, this has all been tried before. This was tried, you know, pre-depression, and all it did was make things worse. Every economist, you know, I think 1,000 economists wrote a letter to the Trump administration telling him that this is a terrible idea.
Right.
And, you know, I guess they just believe that he's smarter than all of the, you know, seasoned, highly educated economists that do it for a living. I don't understand that. I don't know how you put so much faith in a guy that, you know, has bankrupted casinos to make, trade policy and economic policy for you when all of these seasoned economists are telling him how bad of an idea it is. You take his word over theirs. Like I said, I can't even begin to try to explain how they believe that. But the fact is, they think that the tariffs are going to bring manufacturing and jobs back to our shores. That's what they think. And they think this short-term pain is going to be long-term gain. I've heard a number of them say that. And it's yet to be seen, but I tend to agree with the economists. I don't know how hurting the American consumer is going to bring manufacturing back to America. It's just it had never worked before. I don't know why it would work now. So,
you had mentioned, and I had heard a lot of farmers say that, short-term pain, long-term gain. And I was wondering, at times like this, if you are a soybean farmer and you've seen that your largest buyer has gone elsewhere, first of all, where do you market that product, or does it just go to waste? What happens there? And then also, I wanted to pick up on something you mentioned, that this rivals what we saw in 1980. Can you also describe what happened then for people who may not know how bad it got then?
Well, yeah, I'm not old enough to remember that. I mean, I was alive during that time, but I was a small child. So, but my dad and grandpa farmed through that, and they talk about it often. Or
what did they say?
Well, it's just, interest was sky high, land values tanked, commodity prices tanked, and it was just a very turbulent time. And my dad, he contends that, well, it's kind of two front there. It's not as bad as the 80s yet because land values have not tanked yet. And I don't know if they will, but if they do, it's going to be worse than the 80s. But as far as the commodity price and the input costs and interest rates, he says that part is worse than the 80s, specifically the input part, because there weren't monopolies and things in the 80s. I mean, we had a ton of different companies, and you had competition, so the input side wasn't near as bad as it is now. So, you could farm your way out of that in the 80s. Now, with where commodity price is and input cost, you can't farm your way out of it. I'll give you an example. Last year in Arkansas, we had record yields for everything. It was just a great year as far as crop yields. I've got a buddy in Northeast Arkansas that grows a lot of cotton. And he said that he made his farm average for cotton. I'll lay this out there. All your farmer viewers will definitely understand this statement. But his farm average for cotton was better than any single field average he'd ever had. So to put that in just regular people, non-farmer terms, every year on the farm, you'll have one field that just really out yields all the rest of them. You don't know why. You don't know what happened. Try to replicate it, you really, it's just everything was perfect in that field. Well, he had a farm average that was higher than anything that had ever happened to him before. So basically, he had a farm average on cotton that he probably will never achieve again in his lifetime, and never had prior to that. And he still lost $150 an acre on every acre of cotton he grew, because the input costs were so high and the commodity price was so low. I mean, that's not soybeans. It's cotton, but still, there's similar stories for every crop, I'm sure. So if you can't make a once-in-a-lifetime record yield and make money, how do you ever expect to make money with just the 5-year average or the 10-year average? So that's the part that they think is worse than the 80s. We are in a very bleak situation when it comes to what you can produce on the farm and how much you can get out of it versus how much it costs to put it in. It's really we're in really bad shape in that part.
Now, speaking of that, where the industry is at and help that may come. So the Trump administration had announced that it would distribute a plan, maybe several billion in aid, maybe $3 billion and reopen some of the USD activities even amid the shutdown. They had announced a plan to help earlier, but the shutdown happened. Now they're saying we're just going to go ahead and release that anyway. And I was wondering, is this, and I know that, it depends on each farm and what their business is like, but is that type of aid, how much does that actually help your average farm, or for some people, is this too little too late? I mean, this is, for many of them, the second iteration of this, because we saw this during the first administration.
Yeah, well, so farm aid like this, you can look at it like this. Okay, in 2024, all the big corporations, ag corporations, they saw this cliff coming, and they started lobbying DC for farm payments. We got one last December. It got approved last December, came this spring, and then now they're trying to do one for us now. These corporations are the ones that are lobbying for this. Everybody's mad at farmers because they think we're all hollering for a handout. But these big ag companies are responsible for this situation. They artificially inflate their price. Just look at their quarterly earnings sheets. We've been losing money for going on 3 years every year now, and they've been posting record profits, just billions of dollars in profits. So their prices are way out of line with what we can actually pay. So they come to the taxpayer to make up the difference. They put us in a bind. They know that the government's not going to write them a check, but they're going to write us one because, a strong agricultural sector is a national security issue. So they just use us as pass-through entities. And in the short term, this year, absolutely, we're going to have some financial help. Otherwise, we're going to lose a number of farmers, family farms, that is going to be catastrophic to our industry. The average age of the farmer is like 65. There's no new people trying to get in because who wants to get into a business where you lose money every year? So, we're on the brink of losing our entire farming system. So absolutely something has to be done immediately. But in the long term, we have to look at these monopolies. We've got to rein them in, break them up, enforce antitrust laws that are already on the books. Otherwise, we're going to be right back here again next year. We're going to be getting gouged, sitting here right at harvest with low input prices because I don't see this trade war coming to an end, and I don't, we've got a huge crop coming off now. South America is planting a record-sized crop, so commodity prices I don't feel like are going to rebound much, but input prices aren't coming down at all. So in my opinion, the subsidy system needs to go away. I think there should be a well thought out safety net, but this bailout, this continuous, put us in a crisis, bail us out thing, all that's doing is helping the corporations. That's not helping us at all.
And speaking of that, when it comes to, the consolidation of a lot of the farming industry and these big corporations getting involved, and we've seen this in other industries recently, even with real estate amid the pandemic, a lot of hedge funds and other corporations were buying up a lot of real estate, and we saw what happened with that. What is that battle like for the privately owned farms who are trying to push back against that consolidation, which eventually leads to higher prices on input costs and things of that nature? What is that fight like for you all?
Well, it's pretty bleak. I mean, we tell our representatives about it, and they readily admit that they know corporate consolidation is an issue, but I have not heard a single one of them talk about what they're going to do to stop it or to fix it or to rein it in. So behind closed doors, they'll tell you, we understand this is an issue, and then they do nothing about it. Nothing. And that's across both sides of the aisle. We've been dealing with this for decades, and through administrations of both parties. So you can't just pin all this on one of them. You can't say it's all Biden's fault or it's all Trump's fault. This has been going on for decades. One of the biggest mergers, the most detrimental mergers to the farming community was Bayer Monsanto. That happened under Obama and Tom Vilsack. who I voted for, love the guy, but that was a terrible thing to let happen. I mean, I don't agree with everything everybody does. So, this is not a one-party problem. This is a government, all of them problem. But so they're hitting us on all fronts, the inputs, and then now we have, they used to be where a farmer could buy a piece of ground and pay for it by farming it. Well, now we have investment groups that are buying up all the farmland because it's a no-lose situation for them. They get to charge an exorbitant amount of rent. They get a piece of all the government payments that are attached to that property. They, they know that they're going to have a farmer there because we are backstopped with crop insurance, etc. So they're not going to lose a year. So this whole subsidy system is pushing the people it's meant to protect out of business.
And it seems like, as you mentioned, and rightfully so, this has been going on for decades across both sides of the aisle, numerous administrations. And it seems that it, as with other industries, it's going back to money in politics. Who has the money to pay some of these people to push their agenda forward?
That's absolutely right. And I don't know if you know this or not, but the second largest lobbying group in D.C., right behind Big Pharma, is Big Ag. They spend more than defense, more than oil and gas. Yeah. So what does that tell you? I mean, they're getting everything they want at the expense of us. And the taxpayers are the ones that keep paying their bills. Their profit margins, I don't know if you have looked on my social media, but I've got a buddy that does research on this stuff, and he's really sharp. And he pulled their earnings reports for the last 5 years. Their profit margin has been 20% consistently through all of these ups and downs. Wow. So I don't know a single farmer that's had a positive margin hardly the last 2 to 3 years, much less a 20% margin. So if that's not enough for these legislators to say, hey, we got to do something here, I don't know what is. I mean, aside from one of us winning the lottery and donating to some campaigns, I mean, I don't know what else to do.
And, I wanted to ask you about another statement, amid all of this is going, because we're talking about one portion of farming, but Trump had announced a proposal to import beef from Argentina. And I see that is getting pushed back, specifically here in Texas as well, with our cattle industry, because of the impact that it will have on cattle farmers in the U.S. And when he was asked about that on Air Force One, he had mentioned that Argentina and its industry was dying, that its economy was suffering. And I wanted to ask you, as a farmer, when you hear that type of statement, and given what we're going through now, how does that hit for you?
Well, it hits me like it probably has, everybody he's left behind, for lack of that's about as ethical a term as I can put out here. This is probably a family show. Anyway, no, he and I've seen conflicting reports about how much that Argentinian beef import will actually move the needle, and that is beside the point. How much it'll actually hurt or help or whatever is beside the point. The fact that he is, first of all, he's looking at beef cattle, beef prices in the grocery store. He's worried about the consumer, like he said in his tweet, or whatever that thing is. Mm-hmm. Instead of thinking, okay, well, maybe the grocery chains are too high, or maybe the packers are too high, which it is the packers, by the way. There's only 4 of them, and they are price fixing every day. 2 of them just had to settle a huge lawsuit for price fixing, so it is definitely the packers. But instead of looking at those people, he went straight for the farmer. Y'all got to get your prices down. Well, we're just now, as cattle farmers, able to make money. We're just now getting enough for the cows to make money, and he wants us to, so he's way off base there. And then to tell us that Argentina is hurting, well, buddy, we're hurting. And this is the country you're supposed to be working for. So, it's just, he's, I don't know if he's tone deaf or, whoever he likes in Argentina is more important to him than us, obviously. But it's ridiculous, on both of those fronts. I mean, you attack the farmer first when it's the monopolies that are jacking the prices up, and then you, instead of trying to help us, you go try to throw some more money at Argentina. I think it's terrible. I don't know how anybody can think he's still on our side, but if they do, that's their business. But I don't believe he is.
What do you think? Well, first of all, what is it going to take to kind of right this ship? And as you mentioned, this has been going on for decades. But right now, as you said, the situation is getting bleak. What is it going to take for things to turn around for your industry?
Well, it's going to take, in the immediate short term, we're going to have financial assistance. I mean, we are in this box, and there's only one way out of it. Well, there's two ways out of it: bankruptcy or some help. So in the short term, we're going to have some help. And two, the long-term plan has got to be enforce the antitrust laws, or do something about these corporations that are obviously manipulating the market, padding their pockets at the expense of us. I mean, there is no, there's no competition out here, and it's multifaceted. It's not only is there just a few of them, but like just take in the seed world, for example, there's patent manipulation. We're still paying tech fees on technology, seed technology that came out in the 90s. Now, patents don't last that long, but with all of these gene editing tricks and things that they can do, they'll repackage it in another gene and say it and get a new patent as a novel event. Well, it's not a novel event. We're still it's the same exact technology. They just put it in a different spot in the genome. So that's patent manipulation. Nobody's looking at that. So there's so many things. There's, on the fertilizer side, those companies, there's only two that control, like, say, potash, for example. There's only two companies that control all of the potash in North America. They have lobbied for protection of tariffs long before this stuff started to stop foreign imports from being price competitive, so they can jack their price up, just under that. It's ridiculous, and it's until those corporations are reined in, and there's some fairness back in the marketplace and some competition, then we're going to be on this treadmill from now on. So that's got to happen. And then the safety net has got to be reformed to where it is truly a safety net and not a pass-through ATM for these corporations, which it is now. Crop insurance, subsidies, direct payments, all this stuff. And, farmers use this stuff, for better or worse, some of them to make a living. In parts of the country, they plant things they know aren't going to come up or know aren't going to produce because they're backstopped by a crop insurance payment. So they, it's not a good system at all. And I don't fault them for that. Say West Texas, for example, where it's super dry. 4 out of 5 years they'll plant a cotton crop and it'll never come out of the ground because it's so dry, but they'll get a nice insurance payment. And I don't blame them for that. They're playing the hand they're dealt. They're working inside the system that was built. But if that wasn't there, what would that ground be used for? Maybe cattle, maybe nothing. I don't know. But we've got to change the subsidy system to where it's an actual safety net and not just a pass-through entity, which, how do you do that? I don't know. It's you tie it to natural disaster, things like that are, regional. I mean, if they get a hurricane in Georgia and nothing in Arkansas, well, they ought to get help in Georgia and no help in Arkansas. I mean, instead the whole country gets help. I don't understand how they put all this together, but we've got to break up the monopolies and we've got to change the subsidy system. Otherwise, we're going to be doing this every year from now on.
And then what do you think, what do you want consumers to know about this situation? Because they, you hear people talking about prices going up at the grocery store and things of that nature. But I wonder if they really understand what is going on within the farming industry and how that can ultimately impact them today, a year from now, 5 years from now. What do you want them to understand?
Well, so one thing I see all the time on social media is, you're getting what you voted for. I see that all the time, and that's the general public. Most of them don't even know where their food comes from, so it's hard for me to get aggravated at them for making a statement like that, because all they see is what's on the news, right? I mean, that's all they know about agriculture. They don't know about the monopolization and all the other things that we're dealing with. But what I do want them to know is that all these high grocery prices, beef prices, things that you're seeing in the grocery store are not translating to the farmers getting rich. They're translating to meat packers, input suppliers, big corporates are making a killing. But the people actually out here doing the work, we're hurting bad. And it's not because of a vote in last November. We've been hurting for years. And, this tariff thing has disrupted markets, et cetera, but, it's not what put us here. It's just the latest, kick in the teeth. So, whenever y'all, the public, says we're just looking for handouts so we can go buy a new pickup truck or whatever, that is as far from reality as what it can be. Right now, we need help to survive because of the system that's been built around us. If you want to stop having to help farmers out, you need to call your legislators, tell them to start enforcing antitrust, start making trade deals that make sense instead of just on again, off again garbage with tariffs, and try to reform the system instead of just saying we're looking for a handout. We don't want these handouts any more than y'all want to give them to us. We want to be able to make a living and make a profit and sleep at night without having to worry about the whims of a president or the next consolidation in the input side of things. It's we just want a fair playing field.
Thank you so much, Adam, for taking this time to shed light on this important topic. And you have talked about so many important things that I think people need to hear. And I think it's going to resonate with a lot of people. So again, thank you for taking time to speak with me. And for all of you at home, again, if you like this kind of content, don't forget to hit subscribe.